Welcome to The Cynical Developer, the podcast that helps you to improve your development knowledge and career through explaining the latest and greatest in development technology and providing you with what you need to succeed as a developer. In this episode, we're going to be covering getting yourself out there and getting a job. But if you haven't already listened to episode 13, I'd strongly suggest that you go back and listen to that, as in this episode, we build on the foundations that we laid there. The episode has 7 points that we'll address, and you need to get a good understanding of them, really, to succeed. Now, they are having a killer CV, taking a stockpile with you to an interview, getting yourself on LinkedIn, being prepared for an interview, don't lie, stupid questions, and practical tests. So we'll start with having a killer CV. Too many of the CVs that have landed on my desk over the years, they've quickly just slid into the bin, mainly because I've been scared by the sheer size of them that they're going to break my desk. I've seen CVs that are 10 pages long, and seriously nobody is going to look at that. It's just too big. I don't give a damn if you had a paper round at the age of 12, that you've got your bronze swimmer certificate, or that you were voted the most likely to become an astronaut by your careers advisor. If it's not relevant to the job that you're going for, don't include it. And keep your CV short and to the point. Normally around 2 pages is advisable. So do include on there the language that you know and you can write, both spoken and programming languages, because in this day and age, that's going to help you. Include the software that you can use. Don't include languages that you followed one YouTube video on, or the software which you used once or twice back in college or university, because that is going to trip you up. You're going to get inundated with job requests from recruiters about, come and be an iOS developer, come and be a Java developer. And if you've written 2 or 3 lines of it, or you've seen a video about it, it's just going to get annoying and it's going to bring you down. And then these recruiters aren't going to bother with you, because they'll ring you and go, oh, I've seen that you do iOS, or you see that you do Java, or you do C#, and you go, no, I don't. I don't really do it. I was like, well, don't put it on your CV. Don't leave yourself open to that sort of negativity about you straight out the starting blocks. So in this episode, we're talking about getting your first developer job. So you aren't going to have a great deal of commercial experience, but what experience you do have, put it on there. So what experience do you have? In episode 13, I talk about a few things you should do before getting to this stage. So if you followed along, you should have projects in GitHub or a similar platform, maybe contributions to other open source projects. You might have done some free or paid for freelance work. Stick that on there for now. It shows that you're productive, that you're willing, that you're able, that you're actually out there doing something. You're a developer, or you will be, so nobody expects you to be a graphic designer. So your CV isn't going to be amazing, but use a template to build your CV. Because if your layout is poor, it's hard to read and follow. It'll just end up in the bin as well. It doesn't take much for someone that's sifting through hundreds of CVs in a day to just bin that CV because it just didn't look right, or the layout was a bit stupid, or you use Comic Sans fonts or a script font or something ridiculous just to try and make yourself stand out like that. It's just going to end up as a detriment to yourself. Stuff to also include on there: put your mobile number on it, put your email address, get your LinkedIn URL, put your Twitter account, your GitHub account, get that all on your CV. Some recruiters do remove this when they send out your CV, but if the company is interested in you and they're going to ask the recruiter for these details, and because you've included them on your CV originally, that recruiter is going to be able to send them straight over to the company that's interested without having to hassle you, or without having to wait a day or two to get in touch with you to then send it back, which just makes the process so much longer. As I've said, make sure your email address and your social media handles are safe for work and professional. Little Miss Kinky Biatch 69 at hotmail.com. It's not going to get you a job, is it? Now, on a similar line to that, I worked with a guy many years ago who was struggling to get work. He asked me to take a look at his CV because he knew that I'd helped other people out with theirs. I thought it was odd that no one had responded to any of his applications at all. And he was applying direct, not just through an agency. So I said I'd have a look. Anyway, he emails over his CV and I open it up and I look through. Straight away, I see why. There was one glaringly obvious reason why he hadn't been getting interviews. It was his email address. Now, I'm not going to disclose exactly what it was, but it was along the lines of poo-faced bumlicker at, and then the host that he was using. What was this guy thinking? The rest of his CV was fine. I told him to get that sorted out. We set up a new email address for him, and voila, he started getting interviews. Now, I'm not one for taking myself too seriously, but there is a time and a place for humour, and your CV is not that place. Make sure everything on there is professional. So I mentioned a couple of times there, LinkedIn. You need to get yourself on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the place to get good exposure. I've had several job offers from companies via LinkedIn, and not just recruiters touting for my business, actual companies. You don't need to pay the huge sums for the gold account either. The free account's more than enough. Make sure you've got your photo on there as well, because if you haven't got your photo, people sort of think, well, why are you trying to hide online? What have you done wrong? Why do you need to hide your face? A LinkedIn profile picture gets your profile more views. Simple fact, from LinkedIn themselves. If you have a photo on there, people will get more inclined to take a look at it. And the more people that look at your profile, the better. Okay, so you don't look like a Hollywood movie star. Who cares? We need to see you. Some people do say if you're not that confident in the way you look, maybe use a caricature, but make sure it looks like you. There's no point in putting up a photo of some huge guy with more muscles and brains, and then you turn up to an interview, a little skinny guy that weighs 30 pounds soaking wet. That's not going to help you at all, is it? And if you're pushing out a blog or updates to an open source project, get that on LinkedIn as well. Put posts out there about it. Show some activity, and ensure that you fill in your profile as well as much as you can. The more complete your profile is, the more likely it's to show up for people that are searching for people for jobs, to come up on the homepage, to come up in certain categories if you've got all that information in there. And LinkedIn does rate you differently. It gives you different levels depending on how complete your profile is. You can have recommendations on there. So these can be from people that you've worked with on your open source projects, maybe some of your freelance stuff. And everybody loves a good 5-star review, don't they? So get some of them on there. LinkedIn is your online CV, so employers can cross-check your physical CV that they've got from the recruiter or they got from you applying direct. Make sure that that matches what's on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's also your online CV, so employers can cross-check the CV that they've got on the desk to the one that they're seeing online. This is slightly less relevant at this point, but LinkedIn shows people that you've worked for or with, and employers can contact them to find out if you're good and that you can do what you're saying you're doing, or it's just smoke and mirrors. So again, make sure that they match up. The internet's going to be your main communication tool to get out there, to contact people, to find people. So make sure that it's you that's out there. It's not a time or a place for your Xbox gamer tag. It really isn't. The third point was taking a stockpile. Now, I don't mean a stockpile of ammunition or cash to bribe the person that's interviewing you, but when attending your interview, always print off a copy of your CV and take it with you. I'd advise taking 3 or more copies with you, because it depends how many people are going to interview you, simply because they can start asking you about your CV, and if the recruiter has butchered your CV, then it could be hard to follow. They could have taken out some good points. They could have added in some points from you talking to them. They can do all sorts of weird and wonderful things. So at least dishing out a fresh copy of your CV and just say, oh, this is my CV, if you're not sure what they're talking about, can help. As well as taking your CV, it's good practice to take along your certificates, so your degree certificate or any qualifications you've got professionally or other education that's relevant to the job, then it's good to have them to hand. I've been in interviews where I've been asked for those during the interview. I've also been to plenty of interviews where they've not asked me for them. But it's always better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. So I've already alluded to this point, which is don't lie to me. Whatever you do, do not lie on your CV and do not lie at an interview. Now, it might seem obvious, but I've had people sit in front of me and tell me that they had professional qualifications like Microsoft's MCPD and MCTS, Cisco's CCNA, and I knew that they didn't, and they knew that they didn't, but they still put it down there. One guy that I pulled up on this, he even admitted after I grilled him for a little bit on his MCPD, that he didn't in fact have it. And it turned out that he'd been to a seminar about it, thought he could do it, and just decided to say that he had it without having to go and do the qualification. It's just going to land you in hot water. It really is. And these people that are interviewing you, they're going to know if you've got them or not. They can tell. Especially some of these professional qualifications set you that little bit above everybody else. You've got that little bit more knowledge. There's no point in lying and pretending you've got it, because they're going to find out. And if you're asked the question and you don't know the answer, simply say you don't know. Don't try and blag your way through it or try and make it up. Tell them that you don't know. If you've got an inkling about what the answer may be, say you're not sure, but you think it's got something to do with X, Y, and Z, but you can't be 100% on that. Now, a good interviewer is going to come back and say, right, okay, fair enough, and explain it to you, and explain the answer. So next time someone asks you that question, that you know. Doesn't always happen that way, but if you go into a good company with some good developers, they probably will do. There are a few things worse from an interviewer's point of view, sitting there with somebody who's just trying to blag their way through. It's an absolute pain in the backside. It's a waste of my time, and it's a waste of their time. So, like I've said, if you're unsure, then say that you're unsure. As someone new going for a job, you're going for a junior role, you aren't expected to know everything. But being honest helps you and it helps them, because they're probably not expecting you to know the answers to all of these questions, but they want to know where you are. Someone going for a job as a junior developer, you're not expected to know everything, and being honest is better than trying to blag your way through it, like I've already said. When companies are interviewing for a junior developer, they're often looking for a blank slate. They want someone they can mould into the perfect developer for their job, for the position that they're looking for. So not knowing the answer can be an asset to you, as you're not like some of us that have been doing this for years and have really hard-baked ideas about how things are done and how they should be done. You're quite fresh-faced and you're a scared rabbit in headlights. It could work in your favour, and it has done in the past for me. I practice what I preach. If I don't know the answer, I don't try and blag my way through. Stupid damn questions. This is one of my favourite parts of interviewing people. Throwing in what appear to be stupid questions, like, why are manhole covers round? If I spoke to your friends, enemies, colleagues, how would they describe you? And one of my personal favourites, if you could have one superpower, what would it be and why? These questions are often asked to see how you deal with the unexpected, and can come after a particularly hard technical question. Others are asked to see if you can remove yourself from the situation and be critical and honest about yourself. Again, they aren't set up to make you look like an idiot, although be careful what you answer to the superpower one. No one needs to know you're a deranged pervert, at least not until you start your new job. More common questions, and some would say maybe more sane questions that can be asked, are along the lines of, tell me about yourself. Now, I'd start with talking about how and why you wanted to be a developer, how you got into programming. Tell them what drives you and what makes you tick, what you want from a job. Another one is what interests you about this opening. This one's pretty obvious. To get paid, to keep a roof over your head, food on the table. But this isn't really what they want to hear. If you did your homework, you should know how to answer this, and you should know about the company. So a good way to answer that is that you think that their industry is interesting. You've been told the team's very experienced, and you're hoping to learn from them and develop yourself. At the same time, you are hoping to bring something fresh to the table, some new life and sparkle. Maybe not that dramatic, but you get the idea. What experiences do you have using X, Y, and Z technologies? That often gets asked. So again, be truthful. Tell them what you know. Tell them about the little project that you built with whatever the technology is that they're talking about. Don't try and be overly technical if you aren't comfortable with it. And if you have no experience, tell them that. Explain that you don't know, but you're a quick learner and that you can learn. Tell me about your strengths and weaknesses. I've always hated this question, to be honest. I've always hated these questions, and I remember being put in detention in school for giving stupid answers to these questions when they were presented on forms to us. So don't answer, my strength is the ability to eat 40 slices of pizza and an all-you-can-eat buffet at Pizza Hut, but keep me away from the kryptonite, it's my ultimate weakness. It's funny, but again, this is not the time for humour. But don't be too self-annihilating at the same time. Don't be too down on yourself. And in the same breath, don't be too full of yourself. It is a hard balance to strike, and maybe sit down and work it out. But as a good example, the answer that I normally use to sort of answer this goes along the lines of, my strengths are I pick up things really quickly, new technologies as an example. I'm a team player and I want to see us succeed together. My biggest weakness is not knowing when to give up on an idea, more so if I think it's better than the other ideas in the room. But I am working on that. I'm trying to improve myself. And that little bit at the end, the self-reflection, it shows that you can be critical about yourself and that you're aware of what you can and can't do. So another question that gets asked quite often is, tell me about a time when. And these situations are normally relevant to previous jobs you may have listed on your CV that aren't technical, but they're on there and show that you haven't, say, done nothing since leaving school, for instance. They're going to be along the lines of, tell me about when you had to take initiative. You had to deal with a difficult customer, you dealt with a major problem, you were criticised by a boss or a team leader. And they're really just to see how you really deal with these situations, how you overcame those problems, to make sure that you are a problem solver, because the number one thing that you're going to be employed to do as a developer is solve problems. So don't make something up. But if you haven't dealt with an irate customer, say you haven't dealt with an irate customer. You know, if your major difficult problem that went down, it doesn't have to be a server exploded and 3 people were killed and you had to call in the special forces to come and get you out. It could be the fact that your website went offline because somebody on your shared hosting server broke the app pool that your website was hosted in, and how you overcame that, moving to a different server or something along those lines. You know, keep it in reality. Make sure that it's something that you've actually done. The last question that I'm going to really talk about is, what salary range are you looking for? Now, your recruiter or the job advert should tell you the answer to this. If you aren't sure where to market yourself, have a look online, have a look at similar roles, get an idea for similar jobs that are out there, see what they're offering. Even ring a recruiter and ask what the going rate is for what the role is that you're applying for. If you've got someone around you that is in a similar position, ask them if they're willing to tell you. Ringing a recruiter, though, could end in a lengthy conversation and you may regret it. So I have warned you, it can be dangerous. I've also had recruiters let me down in the past, where I didn't realise that the role was for X amount, and what they told me was that it was for half of X amount. And when I've been asked this question, I've said, oh, it's for half of X a year, and I got a funny look. It does happen. These recruiters, sometimes they're not good. Find yourself a good recruiter. It's not something we're going to cover in this episode, but find yourself a good recruiter. So practical tests can also crop up in your interview as well. And depending on how horrible and mean your interviewer is, they can really differ wildly. You could be asked to look at some code, HTML or other markup that's printed out on a page, and just go through it and find the problems. They could give you some code and they'd ask you to tell them what the output from it would be. They can even give you a laptop or sit you down at a computer with a project open in whatever IDE they're using, and it won't build, and you'll need to make it build and run. Now, that could be simple as going through and changing some syntax errors, or it could be the fact that there's big chunks of code missing, and they'll get you to write something. I wouldn't expect these really to be too heavy for a junior role interview, but you never know. You do never know. So other tests that they set, such things as explaining algorithms, design patterns, and getting you to design a solution for a problem on a whiteboard or a piece of paper. You aren't often asked at this level to do these sort of things, and they normally come up for more senior roles. But don't be shocked if they do happen, and you just have to do what you can. It's often done just to see where you are. Are you a level 1 junior, or are you a level 6,000 junior? Where is your experience? All these things are set not to trip you up and make you look foolish. Like I've said before, they're there to find out where you are technically. Being prepared for the interview. This is a must. But going to an interview is not an order. So don't worry about it, or try not to worry about it. The people who you're about to see, they're not there to make you look stupid, like I've said. They simply want to know if you're a good fit for their team and if you could do what is being asked of you for the position. Now, I still get nervous when I go to interviews. I still get nervous when I interview people on this podcast. So I understand how hard it is to stay calm. You do get better over time with dealing with interviews and being a little less jumpy and worried. So get some practice in. If you've got time, go for interviews, even if you don't really want to. If you don't want that job, but you haven't been for a lot of interviews, it's good practice to go and find out the sort of questions and the things that you're going to be asked. And if you are offered the job and it turns out to be a good job and you take it, then great. But if they don't offer you the job, then it would put it down to good experience and fantastic. You've learned something from doing it. There are lots of reasons why we don't get the job that we go for an interview for. So don't take it too personally, but it's just the nature of the beast. But if you don't get the job that you really wanted, then try hard to get feedback. Contact your recruiter that placed you there for the interview. Ask them to get it. And the feedback that you do get from these, make sure that you learn from it. So next time you go for an interview, that you'll know the answer to the questions, or you'll know not to say a certain thing because you came across like an idiot for doing it. Little things like that's really good. And always remember that just because you didn't get the job, it doesn't mean you're hopeless and that you won't ever get a job as a developer. It could be anything. They didn't really know what they were looking for. That's happened to me a few times. The company really didn't know what they wanted, and when I've sat down, they wanted 3 or 4 different people's roles rolled into one, and they're not really understanding the market. They're expecting too much from one person at your level. They're expecting you to be an expert on every programming language there is, but they want a junior developer. They already interviewed somebody that was perfect for the role, or they had someone already in mind for the role, so they're just doing this because they'd already arranged to see you or to tick a box in their form. Or the wind was blown in the wrong direction on the day. It happens. So, like I've said, there's lots of reasons why you don't get a job. Just don't take it too personally. Being prepared for an interview is more than just expecting not to get it. Do your homework. Look up the company online. Read about them on their website. Go and have a look on industry blogs. Find out what they do. Understand what they're about as a company. Now, I know we've covered some questions already that you may get asked. One other question is, tell me about what you know of the company. Now, if you flounder and fluff, you obviously didn't bother to spend the time to learn about them or even look it up, so why should they spend time trying to learn about you? So it's always good to have that ready to go as soon as you sit down. At the end of an interview, you're often asked, do you have any questions for us? So it's always good to arm yourself with some questions that you want to ask the interviewer. Write them down if you need to, as during a grueling interview, it can be hard to remember your questions. I'm not talking about questions along the lines of, how many holidays do you get? Do you have an Xbox? Do you have a free chocolate machine? Serious questions about the role and the technologies that they use are what you should be asking at this point. Some along the lines of, what's their development cycle? Do they offer CPD, continual professional development? What purpose do they see the role fulfilling in their company? How big is the team? What principles does the team follow? Is it waterfall? Is it Scrum? Is it Kanban? Is it something else? Do they prescribe to some weird and wonderful thing that no one's ever heard of? You're showing an interest then in the business. Because the interview is as much about you finding out about the job as it is for them finding out about you and to find out if you're a good fit. But be careful. Don't ask questions that you aren't prepared to answer. So if you don't understand the difference between BDD, TDD and DDD, don't ask questions about them. Don't ask if they do test-driven development, because you're just opening yourself up to stumble again. And we already spoke about worrying and being nervous when you're going to an interview. And bigging yourself up a little bit can help. A very experienced developer friend of mine recently told us at the local tech meetup about some of the things that he does. And he said that he sits in his car and lists out on a little notepad things that he's achieved, the tech that he can use, and why he's an asset to a team. And he goes over them a few times, sitting in the car outside the interview, bigging himself up. So when he walks through the door of the company, he knows that he can do the job, and he knows that he'll be successful. And he also knows exactly what he's achieved if he gets asked about it, and it's there. So you can do that. Write down what you've done, how much you've learned. Look back to when you started learning to write software. It may have only been a few months ago, but look at you now. You sat there in your car, waiting to go into an interview to get a job where someone is going to pay you to put these new skills that you've learned to good use. That's a huge achievement. And if you can be proud of one thing, that is definitely something to be proud of. So I'll do a quick overview of what we've been discussing. We started with make sure you've got a killer CV. Make sure it's not 20 or 30 pages long. Make sure it's 2 pages. Really no longer than that, because people aren't going to read it. They're just going to stick it in the bin. Make sure it's relevant. The information on there is relevant for the job. Don't stick your bronze swimmer certificate on there. And don't stick it on there that you're the local fast food eating champion or anything stupid like that. Getting yourself on LinkedIn, making sure your profile's filled in, because I know as an employer in the past that I'll go and check the people out that I'm going to interview, see if they're on LinkedIn, see what they're about, and to qualify what it says on their CV that's sat in front of me. So get on there, make sure you've got stuff going on that. Take a stockpile with you. Make sure that you've got copies of your CV. It's good to have it with you. You can review it in the car beforehand as well, so that you got it fresh in your mind. Don't lie. Do not lie on your CV. Do not lie in the interview. Make sure you're telling the truth all the time. If you don't know, tell them you don't know. Don't try and black your way through it. And be prepared for stupid questions, because you never know. You might get interviewed by me one day and I could ask you what your superpower is, or some other random question that I think up on the day. Be prepared for practical tests. They could happen, and they're not there to trip you up. The same as the questions aren't there to trip you up. They're there to find out what level you're at. Make sure that you're prepared for the interview. Read up on the company. Make sure you understand what they're about, what they're offering, what they want. And make sure you've got some questions to ask them at the end, because it shows that you're proactive and that you've got an interest in them as well. So I hope what we talked about in this episode has been helpful. And we will continue with these shows. Unless you want to tell me that they're rubbish and they're wasting your time, then let me know. There's comments on the website. Talk to me on Twitter. Come and find me online. I'm there. I'm approachable, and I'm happy for any constructive feedback on any of the shows, the interviews, these monologues of me rambling on, anything. Just get online and talk to me. So thanks for listening to Cynical Developer, and as normal, I'm James Stood Up. Thanks. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on your favourite podcast platform and help the Cynical Developer to grow by increasing its audience. If you have any questions about this or any other episode, then drop us an email, a tweet, or leave a comment on the website, where you can find all the resource links and show notes for each episode.